Hey YouTube. So, I was on the ABC this morning, and for those of you that don't live in Australia, that's the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and it's their job to report the news unbiasedly to all Australians. And guess what I found on their front page this morning? Ta-da! Backlash to university's gender pay gap bake sale highlights trend of online behaviour towards women. A gender pay gap bake sale to be held at the University of Queensland during its Feminist Week, which will charge based on gender, has sparked outrage from students and threats of violence towards the organisers. Madeline Price, the Vice President of Gender and Sexuality at the UQ Student Union, said the response to the Brisbane event highlighted an underlying trend of online behaviour towards women that has galvanised the feminist community on campus. Feminist Week is held on the UQ campus each semester, hosted by the UQ Union, UQU Women's Collective and UQ Women's Department. A series of events will be held between April 4th and 8th, but it is the pay gap bake sale that has drawn the most attention, with many students calling the bake sale discriminatory on the UQ. So I went and looked at this Facebook page, and the only thing I could see was people posting memes and lost property and other random university junk. Essentially, like that app people use in the US to post random shit on, only it's a Facebook page. There were a couple of mentions about cupcakes, and no one really was that mean to anybody. I even went onto the UQ Feminists page and onto the University Union page and also found no hate. But that could just be because they're censoring everybody and deleting posts, but, whatever. They may be receiving private messages that I'm not privy to, but, I can't do anything about that. And since they have posted nothing on either of their Facebook pages, I can neither confirm nor deny they are getting the hate they say they are getting. Carrying on, the description of the event reads, specific to each faculty, each baked good will only cost you the proportion of $1 that you earn comparative to men, or, if you identify as a man, all baked goods will cost you $1. For example, if you are a woman of colour in the legal profession, baked goods at the store will only cost you 55 cents. A now deleted post by a UQ student described the bake sale as blatantly discriminatory against men, and cited Queensland's 1991 Anti-Discrimination Act and the Federal 1986 Sex Discrimination Act. I think his points are perfectly valid. But let's continue. We'll get to all of that in a minute. The article keeps going and says, purpose of bake sale to start a conversation. Mrs. Price said the infamous bake sale stall was designed to generate discussion, but had instead resulted in rape and death threats towards its organisers. The whole purpose of the gender pay gap bake sale was to generate discussion and start a conversation about wage inequality, she said. But instead of being genuine discussion about, a pay gap exists, let's talk about this and engage with the issue, it's been a lot more personal attacks against the organisers and against members of the Women's Collective and students off campus. We've had rape threats and death threats by people who were threatened by the existence of a bake sale that could potentially engage with an issue of inequality. Mrs. Price said there had been some positive responses from students who had recognised that feminism was needed after reading the comments online about the bake sale. It's just been this really interesting dichotomy between people who are threatening attendees and people who've been working on the event, and people who are going, I now see why feminism is relevant because of the people who are threatening you, she said. Now, as if you didn't already know, I condemn all people who issue rape and death threats. I think it's stupid, and you're essentially deflecting the argument away from the actual points where we can win that argument onto things where we can't win, because threatening someone with rape or physical harm is basically saying, I can't win against you using actual evidence, so I'm just going to threaten your person. And that's not what we want to do. We want to actually discuss with you why you think things are the way they are and your reasons for believing there is a wage gap when all the stats say that there is no wage gap. So to anyone who made those threats, you're a dickhead. Please stop. Please stop threatening these people. You're just giving them ammunition to hate us for having an opinion that is wrong-think. And the more you send them rape threats and death threats, the more they are going to accuse us, who are perpetrators of wrongthink of being horrible misogynists who send rape and death threats, when it's just not fucking true. Anyway, just do the last bit and then move on to the really fun stuff. Reaction has galvanized the feminist community. Mrs. Price said members of the women's collective were disappointed the bake sale had drawn the most attention, but that it highlighted some of the issues the group planned to raise across Feminist Week. Obviously, it's there to educate, it's there to start a discussion, but there's so many other amazing things happening during Feminist Week, she said. From a personal perspective, the attacks on members of the women's collective have really hit home because we've come to realize that whenever a woman raises her voice in the public sphere, the attention that attracts also attracts these rape threats and threats of sexual violence and threats to the life of the woman. It's really interesting. That's not the word I'd use, because there are some of the discussions that we want to bring out in the Feminist Week as well, that the gender pay gap bake sale has brought out this underlying trend of online behavior towards women. It's a really negative thing, but a good place to start discussion about this as well is that, well, here's an event we tried to throw on campus and here's the reaction we received and more of its legitimate discussion. Oh, none of it's legitimate discussion. It's just threats. It's been a bit of an interesting experience to say the least, but it has galvanized the feminist community on campus because it's now blatantly obvious why this sort of thing needs to be happening. The pay gap in Australia currently sits at 17.3%, according to the Workplaces Gender Equity Agency. While consulting from Mercer has estimated the gender equality in the workforce is unlikely to be achieved before 2050 at the current rate of change. Now, as you probably expect, I have a few issues with some of the things raised in this article. Like the fact that they're charging different amounts for a product based solely on someone's gender or race or sexual orientation, because that comes up in another article which I think is just well fucked up. And not only is it dishonest and also morally reprehensible to charge people different amounts for the same product based solely on how they look and how you feel about how they look, I think it's pretty much also against the law. Now, there's been people who've argued that, oh, you're just paying to access a metaphor. Yeah, different people are paying different amounts to access the same metaphor. It doesn't matter that it's just a metaphor and, not an actual sellable product, but it was because there were fucking cakes involved, a physical, actual thing. It's discrimination. You're basically saying to, all white guys out there, regardless of how well off or how easy or hard or discriminated against they may be, that your struggle doesn't matter. Doesn't matter anything, nothing else matters about you except for the fact that you're male and white. Those two things are the most important thing about you, and everything else is disregarded, and you have to pay the maximum amount, whereas everyone else who is slightly different from you, in traits that don't even matter, gets a discount. Because reasons. Because patriarchy. The fact that these women got death threats is terrible. Rape threats, even worse. But that doesn't give them the right to assume that everyone hates them, or that, their cause is just because a couple of people are cuntbags. You can't judge the entire population by what a very small handful of crazed zealots says to you. Seriously, you can't. And it's not like people raided the stall and toppled it and they couldn't have their week. No, there's an entire week, twice a year, allocated just to promoting feminism. Now, if I don't, how much more mainstream do you people want to be? You can't be an underground movement forcing their way for equality if you have an entire week dedicated to you. An entire week for your ideology's promotion. Nobody else gets that. Just you guys, because you're special. And lastly, the pay gap. Now, on their fucking article, it states it's 17%. But, a month ago, they published an article on ABC News stating that the pay gap wasn't actually 17%. The closest they could figure out was 3%. I'll link the article below. I'm not going to go through all of it here. I will just read out the bit that says, in reference to the 3% of unexplained, or the 3% pay gap, The sorting of men and women into different occupations has emerged as one of the main drivers of the gender pay gap, a factor that has little to do with the overt bias and reflects complex social pressures that divert women into some professions and away from others. Additionally, research has shown major gender differences in pay negotiation and gender norms around caregiving and the resulting need for workplace flexibility are all important drivers of the gender pay gap, none of which reflect overt discrimination. Basically, what this is saying is that women like to stay home and look after their kids, as if we needed some research to tell us that. Anyway, this video is well too fucking long right now, so I'm going to do another one tomorrow talking about the extra fun, awesome part that I found half an hour ago on the drum, which is the op-ed opinion piece, the op-ed mouthpiece for the ABC, and you're all gonna fucking love that one, I'll tell ya. Anyway, I'll see you later. Bye.